Hey, what's up, YouTube fans? So what I wanted to talk about in this video, right, is with birds, right? Even though birds amongst living creatures are a very distinct group, nothing else particularly like them in their anatomy. They're very distinctive. The creatures that share most DNA with them are the crocodilians, crocodile and alligator, caiman, and gharial, and yet those obviously have very different anatomy from birds, right? And yet, it is still the case, right, which I will show in this video, right, that none of the anatomy of the birds had to start all at once in a single step, right? And most of it started in earlier clades that they are a part of. A clade, by the way, is a group that includes a common ancestor species and all of its descendant species, and which does not include anything else. Most of the bird's anatomy started within earlier clades that they are a part of, and was also inherited by other members of those same clades, right? So, first off, birds are amniotes, right? And they are therefore tetrapods, therefore vertebrates. They fall within the nested hierarchical patterns. They fall within the same nested hierarchical patterns that all life does, right? I'm not going to go over all of the traits of tetrapods, vertebrates. That's taking things too far back, so that's not really the point of this video. But as amniotes, and more specifically as reptiles, they actually technically are reptiles. They're part of the reptile clade. They have amniotic eggs, internal fertilization. They don't have gills at any point in their life. And they have claws, right? And they have reptile-like scales. Now, unlike most reptiles, their body is not covered in scales, right? But they still do have reptile-like scales on their legs and on their feet, right? And so, while to a lesser extent, they still do have reptile-like scales, right? And so, they have these various features, typical of the anatomy for an amniote and specifically a reptile, right? And then taking it further, right, not only do they have features typical of reptiles, but then even many of the features that they have which set them apart from most living reptiles, right, are shared by their closest living relatives, the crocodilians, right? So crocodilians, that's the group they share the most DNA with. DNA evidence strongly indicates that the crocodilians are the bird's closest living relatives, with them together being the two living members of a clade called the archosaurs, right? And in other living archosaurs, i.e. the crocodilians, right, we see that they have many of the features that birds have, which set birds apart from most other reptiles. Features like having a 2-chambered stomach, a 4-chambered heart, unidirectional airflow, laying their eggs in a nest, right? The fact that they put their eggs in a nest, right? All of these features which set birds apart from most reptiles, right, are shared in their closest living relatives, the crocodilians. And so all of these most likely go all the way back to early members of the archosaur clade, right? And so they are just as much a matter of the crocodilians' evolutionary history as they are to the birds, not actually unique to the birds, even though they set birds apart from most other living reptiles, right? Also, many have argued, based on various lines of evidence, such as fossil evidence, that the earliest archosaurs likely were warm-blooded, just as the birds are, right? With the crocodilians actually in their lineage becoming cold-blooded, right? And so to be warm-blooded is actually likely the condition of the earliest archosaurs, with the crocodilians becoming cold-blooded only later, right? So then that is all the more one less thing that had to change necessarily on the birds' lineage, right, since branching off from other living reptile groups, right? At least the crocodilians, right? And okay, taking it further, right, even though we see these various commonalities that birds share with their closest living relatives, the crocodilians, right, and possibly even more commonality in their last shared ancestor with the crocodilians, if the crocodilian lineage changed in this way rather than it being the bird lineage that changed in this way that I just noted, right? While all of that is the case, as I said at the beginning of the video, there still is a very vast difference, right, between crocodilians versus birds, right? And yet, much of that difference is filled in the fossil record, right? With much of the features that set birds apart many of the features that set birds apart from the crocodilians even, still got started long before the birds, right? So fossil evidence indicates birds are the one living member of the dinosaur group, specifically the theropod dinosaurs, and in all other theropod dinosaurs, much like the birds, we see that they were bipedal, right? Walking on two legs, right? Even the ones that did not have wings, right? Like, for example, T-Rex, they did not have wings, right? And they still had long reptile-like tails. They still had reptile-like teeth. Well, specifically archosaur-like teeth, right? The T-Rex and the T-Rex had arms and hands, no wings, right? And yet the T-Rex, right, walked bipedally, right? And not just bipedal, but walked on their toes, right? Just as we see in almost all birds. There are some exceptions like penguins, but almost all birds, not only are they bipedal, but they walk on their toes, which is called digitigrade, right? Likewise, in other theropod dinosaurs, even the ones that did not have wings, did not fly, they walked bipedal, they walked on their toes, right? Also, we see in many other theropod dinosaurs, many if not most, that they had pneumatic bones, right? Much like a bird does, right? And so these are significant features that set birds apart from even the crocodilians, and yet even these features got started way before the bird lineage, right? And then taking it further, right, in specific subgroups of theropods that fossil evidence would indicate are the closest to birds, right, or, you know, that birds are a part of more accurately, right, with them being closest to the other members of those groups, we see many of the other dinosaurs close to birds, even ones that did not have wings yet, were more smaller in size, so not like super big like a T-Rex, much more smaller, more like a bird, right? And even we see feathers. There's fossil evidence of feathers in dinosaurs showing up in some of them before they had wings, right? In ones with that still had arms and hands, right? No wings, right? And even in the earliest of the dinosaurs that had wings and flew, right, as well as having feathers, we still see that they still had more reptilian-like features, right, like having teeth, right? Living birds do not have true teeth, right? Some of them have pseudo teeth, right? Most of them do not even have that. But in early in early close relatives of the birds that already had wings and flew and had feathers, right? We see them still having teeth and having long reptile-like tails, right? Various features like that, right? And so, as you guys can hopefully now see, right, while the birds amongst living creatures are a very distinctive group, right, they still have features that, they still have most of the features characteristic of reptiles as a group. Most of the and then many of the features that set them apart from most other living reptiles, they actually share with other living archosaurs, i.e. the crocodilians, right? And so not actually unique to their lineage. And then even many of the features that set them apart from the crocodilians still got started way before the birds, right? Like walking bipedal, right? And walking on their toes, right? That's obviously very different from the crocodilians, very different from most other living reptiles, but it got started long before the bird lineage, right? And then later on, feathers get started earlier, right? And also, so with the evolution of them moving bipedal, you'll also want to note, right, that certain dinosaurs were more upright than others. Some were in between, where they more so, sometimes move, they likely sometimes move quadrupedal, sometimes bipedal. So there is intermediate that you can have intermediate between quadrupedal and bipedal, and the same limbs that like a T-Rex, for example, used as its arms and hands. It's the same fundamental structure as a crocodilian's front legs and feet, right? You have the shoulder bone, right, the scapula. And then you have humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and digits with phalanges. And then taking it further in the evolution of the wings even, again, that is still the same fundamental structure, right, with the shoulder bone, scapula, right? And then the humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and digits with phalanges. And the evolution of the ability to fly can be broken down into a series of gradual steps because, for one thing, as I said, the wing structure is the same fundamental skeletal structure as used in these other groups for other purposes. And not only that, there are many groups of animals that glide without full-on flying, right? Colugos, gliding squirrels, gliding frogs, even gliding fish, right? There are many groups of animals that glide without full-on flying, and so something does not need to full-on fly to at all start in the direction that can, in some lineage, as they adapt, lead to full-on flight, right? And so there is a gradient of complexity in the ability to fly. And so, birds, while they can appear like a very distinctive lineage, right, not as much when you understand all of this, they very clearly fall within the nested hierarchies of life, just as all of life does, right? All right, that's all for now. See you guys.